What is good, streaming people? Tommy Tran in our Fort Lauderdale studios here at CBS Sports HQ, and we're getting you ready for the 2020 NFL Draft. There's lots of changes to our mock list, including where Tua Tagovailoa lands after hip surgery. So tanking for Tua has taken a big hit, but are we still bombing for Burrow? And how about that race for Chase? Let's welcome in Ryan Wilson, NFL writer, Pick Six Pod contributor, and CBS Sports HQ's draft analyst. We're going to go through the entire first round. Let's start with the bottom picks. Now, you don't have to spend a lot of time here, R-Dub, but just take us through those.
All right, Tommy, let's do it. Let's start at number 32, the 49ers, and Tyler Johnson in Minnesota. I love this guy. He reminds me of Juju Smith-Schuster with a little more wiggle. He can play inside or out. One more weapon for Jimmy GQ there. Then you go to number 31. Guess what the Patriots need? Because their offense isn't very good. They need offensive line help. Marshall Newhouse is not getting it done on the left side. Isaiah Wynn, we don't know if he'll be healthy enough to return. He's only played 2 games this season and last season combined. Josh Jones is incredibly athletic out of Houston, and he's coming up on boards. A lot of people are talking about him at number 30. Kenneth Murray out of Oklahoma. Used to be a time where Oklahoma's defense was a joke. That time has long passed. He is a sideline-to-sideline quick twitch guy, a lot like Devin Bush, a lot like Devin White, both first-round picks in the 2019 draft. At number 29, we have Clavon Chason out of LSU. Undersized as an edge rusher, but that's the one thing that the Ravens currently lack right now. Maybe Lamar Jackson can edge rush as well, but Matt Judon's in the final year of his deal. Even if he comes back, you add one more target there in Chason. And finally, at 28, Hunter Bryant. I absolutely love this guy. He wouldn't have to go very far. He plays at Washington right now. It reminds me a lot of Evan Ingram. Not an inline blocker, more of a move tight end, but a chess piece for Russell Wilson to go along with his targets in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and of course, Josh Gordon.
All right.
And then I think at 27. Oh, I'm sorry, Tommy.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Nope, that was through 28. Take us through 27 down to 23.
Yeah, I was fired up here. T. Higgins, one of the best high point catchers in the game. One of the biggest, he has one of the biggest catch radii in all of college football. He's a huge target. We saw that the Packers offense dropped off a little bit with Davante Adams. That won't be an issue with T. Higgins. At 26, this is sort of interesting because we don't see a lot of running backs still in the first round. DeAndre Swift is the best running back in this class. He can run, obviously, but he's also a great pass catcher. Give Josh Allen a weapon that can do both, make his life a little easier in that backfield. At 25, we have the Dolphins' third first-round pick. This one came via the Texans, and they get Creed Humphrey, the best center in this class. He blocked for Kyler Murray last year. He's blocking for Jalen Hurts this year. That's a huge need for the Dolphins. It certainly makes sense there. At 24, the Vikings take Laviska Shenault. This is one of my favorite picks in this mock draft. We see that Kirk Cousins is coming along. Yes, they have Adam Thielen. Yes, they have Stephon Diggs. Give them one more weapon because they don't have anything after that. Thielen's out with the hamstring. Shenault can play anywhere on the field. Reminds me of Anquan Bolden, but faster. And then at 23, Tommy, we have Tyler Biadasz from Wisconsin going to the Chiefs. That offensive line's been banged up. Biadasz can play center or guard. He's a big-time player that could start from day one and make life easier for Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid there, Tommy.
Hey, I do have a follow-up. You mentioned DeAndre Swift at 26, Ryan. They have Devin Singletary there. Why do you think they will go running back again and not maybe wide receiver where maybe there's a lack of depth at that position?
No, great point. And I've had wide receiver going to Buffalo in many of these mock drafts. Devin Singletary, I don't think he's an ever down player yet, Tommy. I don't think Frank Gore's going to play till he's 50. He may, but if you want a backup plan, Andre Swift sort of gives you the best of both worlds. He's a really good running back, but he can also catch out of the backfield. He does that a lot for Georgia. And one other thing with Henderson, he has a bit of a fumbling issue, so you maybe want to have a backup plan in case Singletary, in case he keeps fumbling the ball. And I think given the way Josh Allen has progressed, and he has progressed, I think that Swift gives him the best of both worlds scenario in terms of being able to run the ball and then also catching those quick swing passes in the face of a blitz.
All right. Also learned the word radii. I like that when you had a reference there in terms of the radii and the wide receiver. All right. So that's 32 to 23. Take us through the next 3 picks, which is 22 to 20. And we have back-to-back linemen as well.
Yeah. So I talked about Oklahoma and their defense coming on. Neville Gallimore to the Colts. He's a quick twitch, big guy. Doesn't have a lot of pass rush moves at this point in his career, but he gets into the backfield extremely disruptive. I like that for that Colts defense. At 21, Javon Kinlaw, he is the best pass rushing interior lineman in this class. You put him with D. Law, the edge rusher, Van Esch and Smith, the linebackers, and then you have something. They've struggled to help solve that problem. At number 20, Tommy, we have Bryce Hall. the cornerback out of Virginia. His season's over because of an ankle injury, but he's a physical type player that can go along in the process of helping replace Jalen Ramsey. He's not going to do that by himself.
All right, that's 22-20. Moving on to number 19, the first of 2 first-round picks for Oakland, or the other way around, the second of 2 there, depending on how we're drafting here. But you have Henry Ruggs out of Alabama heading to Oakland/Las Vegas.
Yeah, he is an Al Davis type player. He is the fastest person on the Alabama roster. He is one of the fastest people in college football. He's averaging 19.4 yards per catch. And here's something to consider when talking about the Raiders. The leading target getter on that team is tight end Darren Waller, who's having a fantastic season. Number 2 on that list is possession receiver Hunter Renfrow, who I like to call Will Brisson's little brother. But if you want a deep threat, you draft Henry Ruggs, and it actually forces Derek Carr to do more of what John Gruden wants to do, which is throw the ball down the field. Ruggs is a lights-out player, forces defenses to change the way they play, and it creates opportunities for other players there too, Tommy.
All right, that's number 19 in the Oakland Raiders. Ruggs are part of that fantastic wide receiver group out in Alabama, and we're not going to be done talking about Bama wide receivers, but we do move on to picks 18 through 14. Take us through this list, starting with 18 in the Carolina Panthers.
A.J. Terrell, another big physical corner, played last year alongside Trayvon Mullen, who was a second-round pick of the Raiders. I think he's going to be better than Mullins as it stands. The Panthers have young quarterbacks in Dante Jackson and James Bradbury, but they need more depth, and A.J. Terrell certainly provides that. At 17, I have the Titans taking Derek Brown. Derek Brown, to me, is the best defensive lineman in this class. He's good against the run. He's good against the pass. He was extremely disruptive against LSU a few weeks ago, and imagine him lined up alongside Jarrell Casey and this year's first-round pick, Jeffrey Simmons. That's something to be fearful of if you're in the AFC South. Number 16, this is the Dolphins' second pick in the first round. I haven't taken Terrell Lewis. This is a new name on this list, Tommy. He might be the best defensive player on this Alabama roster, and the reason we haven't seen him talked about so much is because last year he had an ACL injury, the year before that an elbow injury, and he's finally healthy and finally coming along. He also flashed in that LSU game, and that's a huge need for the Dolphins, so that makes sense there. Number 15 is Dylan Moses, the linebacker, who also was injured earlier this year for Alabama. His season's over. And at number 14 is Christian Fulton, cornerback out of LSU, one of the best cornerbacks in this class. There's very little to be concerned about if you are the Raiders. They need depth there. I mentioned Trayvon Mullen earlier, their second-round pick. Darryl Worley is in the last year of his rookie deal. Fulton is a no-brainer, and as they try to revitalize that defense, which has actually come on of late, Tommy.
All right, I do have a follow-up on number 15, Dylan Moses, which right now you have him projected going to the Eagles, which, by the way, since 1980, just one linebacker in the first round. That was back in 2014 with Marcus Smith. So if you have him, because he's got some options, right? Like he can maybe go back to school to try to maybe up his status there and his worth, or he could be a first-round pick at 15. What do you think the Dylan Moses market is right now? What do you think some of his decision-making will be?
So here's the backstory, Tommy. In August, right before the college football season started, he tore his ACL. That's an 8 to 9 to 10 month turnaround in terms of the rehab. So he'll be fully healthy by the time the NFL season rolls around. And that, as you point out, that's the decision he has to make. Does he want to return to Alabama? Does he want to try to cash in? And if he does, the question is, how healthy is he? And if he's as healthy as Jeffrey Simmons was, who was the Titans first round pick, who came back from ACL injury that he suffered in February, by the way, then he's no doubt a first round guy. He's a top 15 talent when healthy. Coming into the season, he was my number 1 linebacker. He's dropped just one spot, and we can talk about that in a minute. But he's a game changer. Guess what the Eagles need in the middle of that defense? Game changers. And I feel like he makes sense there, even though, as you point out, they're not really fond of drafting linebackers in round 1.
All right, let's look at Dylan Moses and the player profile. Let's keep things moving. Let's go 13 through 11. And once we get to 11, it's going to be Jerry Jeudy at Bama. We'll go heavy on him, but take us through the next few picks here.
13, we have Grant Delpit, going to the Browns. They need help on the back end. Grant Delpit, here's the thing, he needs to start tackling people. Fantastic talent. He's not tackling anyone. He's going to continue to fall down draft boards if he refuses to tackle people. Number 12, we have Jedrick Wills going to the Chargers. Tommy, I know you watched that game in Mexico City against Kansas City. Philip Rivers didn't have a chance, partly because he didn't have much protection, and partly because apparently he's not very good. And finally, at the bottom here at number 11 of this list, Jerry Jeudy going to the Jaguars. Just got to find out who his quarterback's going to be, Tommy.
All right, so we got the Jerry Jeudy at 11 to the Jaguars. It'll be interesting to see where you have CeeDee Lamb later on in this first round mock. When we do look at Jerry Jeudy, though, and the likes of CeeDee Lamb and some of the others that we've already mentioned in terms of the wide receiver group, what do you think the prospects are for him 3 years from now? From a talent standpoint, is he the best receiver in the draft?
Coming into the season, not only was the best receiver, Tommy, he was my #1 player on my draft board. Here's what I feel about Jerry Jeudy. He has parts Tyreek Hill and part Manny Sanders in his game. And if that appeals to you as a coach or a GM or a quarterback, he might be someone you should be interested in. He looks bigger. He plays bigger than he's 6'1". He doesn't look like he's that big on the field. That's because he's slight at 192. He's not a burner. Last year at Alabama's Pro Day, he ran a 4.53, but he plays at about 4.2 speed. He runs the best routes of anyone in college football. You cannot cover him with one person underneath routes. You can't cover him deep with one person. So he's a huge problem. I think he makes a lot of sense in Jacksonville. Should he be there at 11? He may not be, Tommy, because he helps everyone around him immeasurably. Game changer is the word that comes to mind. And like I said, Tyreek Hill, Manny Sanders, if that's your type of receiver, you should make a point to draft Jerry Jeudy.
All right, now we're entering the top 10 conversation of this mock draft. Take us through 10 through 6.
Number 10, Tommy, I have Isaiah Simmons, who is now my #1 linebacker. He's a hybrid. He plays linebacker/safety. I've seen him play free safety. He's been the deepest safety on the field, but he can also come up and crush you. He's a chess piece in Matt Patricia's offense. I mean, that's a slam dunk in my mind if he's there on the board. At number 9, I have the Cardinals taking Trevon Diggs. Listen, Patrick Peterson isn't getting any younger, but he can still play. They drafted Byron Murphy last year. Trevon Diggs is another physical corner. He looks like Patrick Peterson when he walks down the street. You have 3 physical corners. That defense has to get better. That certainly happens with the addition of Diggs. And number 8, I have A.J. Epinesa out of Iowa. He didn't play well at the beginning of the season. We don't know if it's pressure or if it's because he was playing full-time, and last year he was just a part-time guy. But he has come on the last 2 weeks against Wisconsin and Minnesota, where he's totaled 3.5 sacks, 3.5 tackles for loss. When he wants to be, he is unblockable. Falcons need help on defense. That makes sense there. At number 7, I have Jeffrey Okudah going to the Broncos. The best cornerback in this class, and it may not be close. He's had an outstanding year at Ohio State. Chris Harris in the final year of his deal in Denver, so we see why that would happen for the Broncos should Okudah be on the board. Number 6, Tommy, some guy named Justin Herbert out of Oregon. He has now moved up to number 6, and we can talk about this in a second if you want. But Jameis isn't the answer. We know that in Tampa. He has 18 interceptions through week 11. They have to move on from him, and we know anything, it's that the head coach, Bruce Arians, can fix quarterbacks. And while Justin Herbert struggled a little bit, I feel like that might be the right landing spot for him in a post-Jameis Winston world.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Are my eyes deceiving me? You're talking about Justin Herbert at number 6. Going to take a timeout only because you had him at number 22 to the Colts in your latest mock. So, again, you mentioned it a little bit, but please expand on how big of a change this is. Is this a Tua factor, a Herbert factor, the draft stock and position factor? You lay it out for me because that's a big move, man.
So, Tommy, we've talked about this earlier in the season, how Justin Herbert has been underwhelming. And I don't think you can argue that. He missed a lot of throws he should be making with all the talent he has. And I'm talking about his personal physical talent, not the talent around him, even though he has the best offensive line in front of him. He has not been good for the first 7 or 8 weeks of the season, had an up-and-down junior season, so he came back. The last 2 weeks, he has been absolutely on fire. Last 2 weeks against USC, he went off. Last Saturday against Arizona, he went off. And it makes you wonder if you're an NFL GM, okay, is this the Herbert we've been waiting to see? Is this the blip on the radar? And as you mentioned earlier, part of this is Tua. Tua is not in my first round mock this week because of the hip surgery. We'll find out more as he goes through rehab, and all signs are it's going to be pretty encouraging, which is great news for Tua and great news for NFL teams that need him. But Justin Herbert is now in the conversation of demand outstrips supply for quarterbacks. He's playing well right now. He's gotten teams' attention. Can he keep it up? I'm still not drafting him in the top 15. I don't feel comfortable right now, but if he plays at this level, maybe I can be changed. The Bucs are at their backs against the wall, Tommy. They need a quarterback, and maybe they feel like Bruce Arians can get the most out of Justin Herbert sooner rather than later.
All right, so that's a look at Justin Herbert, who's climbed up the mock draft boards in the eyes of our Ryan Wilson. Again, the Colts at 22 last time around, all the way up to 6 with Tampa Bay. All right, top 5 time. Let's start with pick number 5, Tristan Wirfs, the lineman out of Iowa.
Tristan Wirfs out of Iowa. He can play left or right tackle. The Jets obviously need help along the opposite line. Kelvin Beachum is in the final year of his deal. If he plays right tackle, he can be the blindside protector for Sam Darnold. If he plays left tackle, he can replace Beachum. It makes a ton of sense. They have to get better on offense and protect Sam.
All right, moving on to number 4, Andrew Thomas, the other lineman from Georgia.
That's right, you got it. So this is the first of the 3 picks for the Dolphins. There is nothing, you can't find anything wrong with this game. I've talked to scouts before that said, why do you need to find something wrong with that player's game? There's nothing to find wrong. He's the left tackle. You pencil him. He's been the starter at Georgia since his freshman year, and it is almost impossible to beat him in any manner. So yes, he goes to Miami, no brainer. But here's the problem, Tommy. Now with 2 off the board, the Dolphins have taken Andrew Thomas, edge rusher Terrell Lewis, and an interior offensive lineman Creed Humphrey. No quarterback. So that's the concern. Whenever they find a quarterback, he'll be well protected with the draft picks they've made so far.
Oh, well, maybe them winning back-to-back games has certainly hurt them, because now they're not getting one of the 2 best quarterbacks. They may lose out on the first one. Of course, we haven't gotten yet to Joe Burrow. But before we do, top 3 stratosphere now. Pick number 3, you do have CeeDee Lamb, the talented wide receiver out of OU.
Last few weeks, Tommy, I've had the Giants taking Andrew Thomas for obvious reasons. Daniel Jones hasn't been well protected, and that would go a long way in solving that problem. But also, guess what? They traded Odell Beckham before the season, and they didn't really replace him. Darius Slayton's been a nice addition as a day 3 guy in his rookie season, and they have Evan Ingram, but he's a tight end. Why not get someone to replace Odell Beckham? CeeDee Lamb is the most exciting player in this draft, and that includes Jerry Jeudy. He is so incredibly tough. He breaks tackles like someone who is 20, 30 pounds heavier than he is. He's averaging 22 yards per catch, Tommy. Those sound like all things that Daniel Jones could benefit from. And he didn't even play last week. That's how good he's been. And he's still, right now, my number 1 wide receiver. And I think the Giants could do no wrong by taking CeeDee here, even if they need someone like Andrew Thomas.
Oh, my gosh. You talk about right now Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley and Evan Ingram. And they've had some problems with wide receivers. Sterling Shepard's been dealing with, of course, a lot of concussion issues. So potentially CeeDee Lamb out at number 3 to the New York Giants. Top 2 now, you got the Redskins. And are we talking about a chance that they may get a quarterback? They already have one in Dwayne Haskins. Or are we really thinking, yeah, Chase Young, the edge rusher out of OSU?
They have to go Chase Young. I've had Chase Young penciled in at number 2 to the Redskins for probably a month now. He is undeniably the best defensive player in this draft, arguably the best player in this draft. I mean, this Wisconsin game alone makes him a first-round pick if he never played another snap this season. He goes there. He joins Montez Sweat on the defensive end and just dominates. Here's the thing, Tommy, and we can talk about this in future mock draft conversations. If the Redskins, who are the worst team in football in my mind, end up with the number 1 pick, I wonder if there's a conversation if they take a quarterback first. We can talk about that later, but just something to keep on your radar and something it seems like the Redskins would do 12 months after taking quarterback Dwayne Haskins.
No, let's have that conversation real quickly now, because I've already given it away. It's going to be Joe Burrow to the Bengals at number 1. So let's say, for argument's sake, that the Redskins do end up with the number 1 overall pick, and they're not going to maybe shop it around, and they're going to stay at number 1. Chase Young is a talented player. You've talked about it. Brady Quinn's talked about being the top overall prospect, but you say potentially they could go quarterback despite drafting one with Dwayne Haskins last season.
So here's the deal, Tommy. We saw it last year with the Cardinals, and a lot of us couldn't believe that the Cardinals were really going to take Kyler Murray. They did. Guess what? The Cardinals are much better for doing so. The mistake was taking Josh Rosen's the year before. Dwayne Haskins was drafted 15th overall. He wasn't a top 5 pick, a top 10 pick. It was mixed reviews. We know that the owner, Dan Snyder, liked him. We also know that Jay Gruden wanted to take someone else. So if they're not in love with Dwayne Haskins, and he's had an up and down season, mostly through no fault of his own, that team is not really good, and they fall in love again with Joe Burrow, or Tua, should Tua be healthy enough to go, you wonder, instead of taking Chase Young number 1, or perhaps trading down and getting a stockpile of picks, which they desperately need to restock that roster, would they just take Joe Burrow and try to start over there? It would be the worst case scenario for Joe Burrow, for Tua, for whichever quarterback went there, and Dwayne Haskins could be the first one to testify to just how terrible it's going to be. I would hope they would take Chase Young, but again, it's early. The Redskins do crazy things, and if they fall in love, just like Steve Keim in Arizona did with Kyler Murray, we might be having a different conversation in April, Tommy.
All right. Again, things can change from this mock draft to another one, which we'll put out together as the season moves forward. And again, that leaves the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow at number 1. And look, they took a quarterback in Ryan Finley, not as high as some of the first-round guys, but it looks like they wanted him to be potentially a future franchise guy. But if you've got the number 1 pick, Joe Cool's the guy, right?
Tommy, he has played so well this year and has come out of nowhere. You watch a lot of college football. I watch a ton of college football. A year ago, we were watching Joe Burrow going, okay, he's a guy. He'll graduate next year and get a job at his dad's insurance company, and he'll probably be quite happy. His dad is a coach. He's not an insurance company, but just for the purposes of that joke. But then this offseason, he worked hard. He worked with Tom House, the throwing coach. His arm's gotten better. Joe Brady, the passing game coordinator, has mixed things up. The offense is now in the 21st century, and he has been absolutely dominant. 78.6% completion percentage. I said it last week. I'll say it every week. 21 points higher than a year ago, Tommy. He does very little wrong. He threw 2 interceptions last week against Ole Miss, and you could say, okay, those were mistakes, and they were. But he threw 5 touchdown passes, and they were some of the throws he made were hard to wrap your brain around. So he can play under pressure. He can play with guys in his space. It's not like he's throwing to wide open guys all the time. And it just makes too much sense not to happen in Cincinnati. They're done with Andy Dalton, obviously. I don't think Ryan Finley's the long-term answer. You take Joe Burrow, and you feel good about yourself. He's an Ohio guy, and you move on and trying to rebuild this organization, Tommy.
It's just been interesting. You know, I think he is a little underrated with his mobility. I think he's Josh Allen light with his feet and Matthew Stafford light with his arms. So it'll be interesting to see if he puts all of that together. And he's a top elite prospect right now that's in the conversation for the top overall pick. A guy that was in the conversation for top overall pick was Tua Tagovailoa. You alluded to it earlier, and we talked about that hip injury that's required surgery. All indications are he's going to come back and be fine. But not only is he dealing with the hip that he suffered at Hail State, R-Dub, but he's got the ankle issues. He's been beaten down a little bit. I want to say that he's got, a lengthy injury history, but certainly it is there. So what is the draft fallout from Tua? What was some of the decisions that you had to make with this latest mock in regards to Tagovailoa?
Well, the recovery period is the biggest concern right now, and it sounds like look, these hip injuries can be serious, especially when there's fractures involved. And but it sounds like everything went as well, maybe even better than anyone could have expected. Nick Saban certainly sounded more upbeat days after the surgery than he did on that Saturday after the injury, and that's great news for Tua, great news for his football future. But how long is this recovery going to take, Tommy? I've heard reports that he could be back to throwing in 3 months, which would put that around February, March. And that's great news. But then again, you touched on it, the 2 ankle surgeries, both ankles, and then now this hip surgery. Where is he on the durability scale? The NFL team doctors will ultimately determine where he's worthy of being drafted. He's a first-round talent, undeniably so, top 5 player. There's so much to love about his game, but he's 6'1", he's 215-ish, 218-ish, and he takes a lot of hits. And that's the concern when you're investing that type of money. If he were healthy and nothing to worry about, he goes up there with Tua. But now, with the extenuating circumstances of the injuries, I think he's a first-round pick, Tommy, but we just have to wait and see when he's healthy and when he's able to do the things he needs to do to impress coaches and those NFL teams. Right now, I have him off the first-round mock draft board. I suspect that will change as we learn more because he's just so incredibly good, and you're hopeful that he can return to playing like he was playing before he got hurt on Saturday.
All right. Good news is all indications, again, we're taping this on a Tuesday, that Tua had surgery on Monday, going to stay in Houston and eventually make his way back to Tuscaloosa for rest and rehab. That's Ryan Wilson, our draft analyst, Pick 6 pod contributor and NFL writer. He does it all, folks. Check out us on YouTube, and we'll have more on HQ in the following weeks with updated mock drafts. You can catch that on CBSSports.com. Ryan, great stuff, man. Good talking to you, bud.